Welcome to How I Grew My Practice, the podcast where health professionals share the behind-the-scenes stories of how they built a thriving practice. Each episode will uncover surprising challenges, victories, and life lessons learned throughout their journeys. Let's get started.
Welcome to How I Grew My Practice, a podcast presented by NexHealth. I'm your host, Alec. In this episode, we have NexHealth's first employee joining us. He's been responsible for helping build out sales, customer success, marketing. He's currently working on partnerships and our API. The man who does it all, no task too small, Mr. Bobby Jones. Bobby, what up? How you doing today?
What's going on, Alec? Good to see you. Doing well. Excited about this today.
So most folks probably do not know who Bobby Jones is. Again, being the first employee of a company valued at $1 billion is not a small thing. So Bobby, can you give us a little bit of your background? Who are you? How'd you meet Al and how'd you land at NexHealth?
Yeah, very good question. Let me start from the top. So I was actually freshly off of an MBA. I was actually still finishing my final semester of college. I was in the process of finalizing my thesis. And I kind of found it that I wanted to join a company as an early hire. I wanted to help build something off the ground, particularly in healthcare tech and actually particularly in SaaS. I actually found Al and NexHealth through an article online and through AngelList. And I actually just reached out cold. And I had a few conversations with Al throughout this final semester that I was in. And I was actually in California considering a job out there when I got a call from Al. And he basically gave me like 48 hours to be in New York to start. It was no joke. It was a Friday afternoon. It was like, all right, let's do this. Can you be in New York City on Monday? At that point, I said yes. I got on a plane back to DC, packed up a couple bags, and took a train to New York City. And I honestly was living on a former roommate's couch, former college roommate's couch for a couple weeks until I found a place. That's how it started. I think to give a little more context there, like grew up in a very entrepreneurial environment, knew that's what I wanted to do. So it's finding the right person, finding the right company. But at that point, like I was 23. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. Had some conversations. And to be frank, like on the surface, Al and I came from very different backgrounds, but instantly gelled, instantly default trust was there. Something we'll get to in a little bit, but that's how it started. And from there, we just kind of started running.
So it's not every day that, you kind of blindly follow another young 23, 24-year-old and now the CEO of NexHealth, Alaman. What were a couple of the characteristics that made you so confident in joining a company that had zero revenue, zero customers?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think like one thing first actually is something that I realized early on. It's like first employees, like often similarly to founders, like you find yourself doing jobs that you've never done before, which can be a blessing. It can also be a curse. And I'm like incredibly lucky to be in that position and have put myself in that position. Thinking about that was kind of like what I wanted. So when getting into this, not necessarily what I was getting into, thinking about these traits, a lot of it was this vision. I know it sounds weird, and I know it sounds, a lot of people think about this broader vision of NexHealth and this mission of NexHealth. We're facilitating innovation in healthcare. A lot of this coming back to our synchronizer, building our own proprietary integrations into EHR systems. That was part of the plan since the beginning, and I think a lot of people think that it took some time for us to develop that vision. And I saw that now. It was like a blind trust in the beginning, and hear him speak to it to the point that it was kind of like, I'm in, I want to run full speed at this. Like, tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I need to execute on. And it's pretty incredible. Like 6 years of working on a mission and like truly starting to see it come to fruition. Like have not lost it as we've scaled. Have we reached $1 billion valuation? Have we reached 300 plus employees? I don't think that perfectly answers your question, but it was legitimately the vision that was in place. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's been there from the beginning. We didn't just start as this product that we were selling into dental offices with the idea to grow to this large company. Like, did have a deliberate plan with it. Didn't know exactly how we were going to get there, but I saw that now early on. And I think to bring back to my earlier comment, like, I kind of wanted to be in that position. I definitely wanted to be in that position, not kind of, where I had not done this before. It was constantly changing, and it wasn't clearly defined. But there was an end result. There was an end goal that I was actually passionate about. I think going back to even what I said earlier when I was in school, I had an idea that I wanted to work on something that was going to be impactful on society, whether it was like small or large. And I know that's kind of like a cliche thing to say, but that was part of it. And a lot of it was coming together in those early conversations with Al. And part of it was like, I was young. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I wanted to sink my teeth into something. So I hope that answers it well.
I mean, maybe there's a little bit of ignorance is bliss, but I mean,
Absolutely.
even in my, I've been here now for a year and change, and it's just like, his tenacity and vision alone, knowing exactly where you want to run and having a lot of sheer speed to get to that destination, I think is kind of come through in a lot of the company's culture.
Al just doesn't take no. And I think I saw that early on, and it was like, this is something that I can like ride with. Like, let's go do this. So yeah.
I no doubt, and you feel it here every single day. So I guess kind of just going further into our culture, and maybe a little bit more about Al and what Al's influence has been over the last 6-7 years building this company. But to you, like, what makes NexHealth NexHealth?
Yeah. So I think I have a little different perspective, which is why we're having this conversation. But a lot of it comes down to our culture and operating principles, which I'm going to speak to. But I think a lot of what makes NexHealth to me, and speaking this from a first employee perspective, like, it's ever changing. And I mentioned earlier, like, it really is a privilege to learn so quickly. Like, there's no quicker way to learn. There's trial by fire. We definitely made a lot of blunders in the early days and like later days as well. And like growing up from this, kind of like picking your head up and being like, having this realization of been operating so devoutly, like kind of in this bubble for the last 6 years. And having this changing environment. So when I think about what makes it NexHealth to me, that's certainly part of it. I think, our culture though, like the success in the early days came from us like literally willing things into existence like day after day for like 3 years. And that means like doing things others are not willing to do. That's a key operating principle of ours. And I think that just like these things came organically. Taking full ownership here and like doing actual things others are not willing to do, whether you think of it from a higher level of our mission of facilitating innovation by breaking down these barriers, by building our own proprietary integrations into the electronic medical record systems. But if you actually take it down to, a little bit of a lower level, whether it's, going and doing physical installs, talking to pretty much every dentist in New York City for the first 6 months, trying to build a product. Like, a lot of things that we were doing were just nobody else was doing it. And we realized it was what we had to do to build a product, to build our own integrations, and just go to market. So those are a few things. It's really interesting to look back on some of the early days and some of the early things that we had done. And you think about our operating principles that we live by today, like, they all came from that. They all came from the early days. They came from what we were doing, whether it was things like obviously solving the customer's problems first, like not yours. Like, I think we're a very customer obsessed company. We always have been. It's a differentiator of ours in the industry that we play in. I think the biggest thing though, and I hit on this at the beginning, is like default trust. Like, I had default trust in Al since the beginning, and he thankfully had default trust in me from the beginning and was able to let me run and let me go after opportunities and let me figure a lot of things out early on that got us here. So that's a big one for me. But to me, a lot of them come together. Yeah, they're individual operating principles, but a lot of them do come together. But yeah, I think ownership too, which plays into this, but being able to push the envelope, being able to bring ideas to the table that like we could legitimately execute on. I think, when you adhere to process for so long, or do things like how they've always been done, like that's where things fail, and that's where you don't capitalize on opportunities, and that's what we had always done differently. So yeah.
So given that you've been here for 6 years, I mean, you've obviously not only have seen the culture document put together more so recently, I guess in the last year, but to your point, you really felt those operating principles come to life over 6 years. Is there a few, or can you share one specific story from really early on that you think kind of like really indicates what NexHealth is all about?
Yeah, I have a couple. There's a lot of funny ones too. We might have to do another episode on this.
Yeah, we'll get you back.
Especially some of these fundraising stories. But yeah, I think a really pivotal one for NexHealth, and even just like personally, this is very much a personal one, is when we ran out of money. We ran out of money in early 2018. And when I say we ran out of money, we legitimately had 2 weeks left of runway. Like we were at the point of the company where like paychecks weren't really a thing for a little while. And basically what happened was there were 4 of us. It was Al, Waleed, myself, and customer success manager onboarding. And our largest, we were basically about to run out of money. Our largest customer at the time was an enterprise customer. It was a multi-location group. And, we had them on a month-to-month contract. We had to go out and fly out, go see them in the middle of the winter. Not a great place to go. And convince them to pay us up front for the year and pay us annually. And that bought us about 3 more months of time. And if you actually look at the trajectory of NexHealth, if you look at the trajectory of our revenue, if you look at the trajectory of our customer base, like that was a turning point. That was a turning point for us. We went out there, we convinced this customer of ours to pay us annually for the year, pay us up front, and bought us about 3 more months of time to really go to market. Like that was it. That was our last chance. That was our last shot. I remember like the board meeting that month as well. It was grim. It was very grim. And it was like, all right, this is our last shot. Let's go do this. And we're still here today.
Yeah, there's a lot of do the things others are not willing to do mentality, just even from that. Can you share another one? I know that there was a story kind of like, how did NexHealth get through COVID?
Yeah. I have two interesting things there. I think one, like when COVID hit, we like went on the offense. I feel like a lot of companies were not like good to their customers when COVID hit. For example, we paused billing for all of our customers. And we were actively going after and bringing on more customers. I will say when COVID first hit, it was probably the busiest I've ever been in my life working at NexHealth. And we were actively on the offense. We stopped billing all of our customers. We went out and we were bringing on many more customers. And it's because of what we were doing. And it's because of, there's definitely looking at what we do and where the environment was. Like a lot of what we were doing played into that. But ultimately, pausing billing for all of our customers, making a pivot, going aggressively after more customers, and not charging them. We did not bill during COVID to net new customers either for like a 6-month period. So in addition to that, I think that's something, that's a good story. There's a lot more that goes into that. That's kind of a reaction to COVID, but more specifically, we acquired a company during COVID. I would say it was like peak pandemic. We were also just a Series A company. We had closed a Series A at this point. We were not that large, not that far along. We actually made an acquisition of a digital forms company that is now a great product of ours, and it started from a partnership. We've been partnered with them for a while. but this was crazy. Like everyone from our investors, from, you know, from our investors to everyone outside of it, like thought this was insane. Like, why would you go acquire a company that are the same size of us? But it was like a very important tool. It was a very important product. It was very important for our market and actually what we were doing, given the time of COVID and also to today. So I think like lesson there was problem solving. Like, and it was also challenging a lot of status quo. Why would you go acquire a company that's going to do this? Or why would you go acquire a company given your size, given the environment, given the pandemic? It was actually like the complete opposite of what everyone was telling us to do. And it turned out to be one of the best moves that we made.
That's so awesome. You know, the way that startups work, and it sounds, you know, given your 6 years, it starts off extremely turbulent. There's no set process for anything. It's sheer grit, the problem right in front of you, solve it, move on to the next. And again, it's kind of that idea of no task is too small. You end up getting to a Series A, Series B. At what point in time did you think, wow, like this company is like really moving and grooving? Like, is there a point in time or a story that you have where you're like, wow, like things are pretty stable and we're actually starting to see a point of scale?
Yeah. Things are pretty stable, I guess. That's a good question. I think more recently, it's been very interesting. I know I kind of said it earlier, like, you know, you're working so diligently on something, and like, yeah, you're moving roles, you're moving across different project, different initiatives. Like everything is changing every 3 months, something's changing. I think given the position I was in, like that was just inevitable, and it's how it goes. But like and I guess like kind of, you know, pick my head up more recently, and it's like, holy shit, like this is what we've been building the last 5 to 6 years. Here we are. And a lot of it has been in the last like 12 months. And it's not that we're at in a perfect place and everything's so stable. Nothing is ever going to be that way. And it was never that way in the beginning. I think part of it was like early on, like ignorance. Like it was a lot of fun, and it still is a lot of fun. But at the time, early on, was just like day by day, like what's it going to be today? What's the next thing that we're working on? So when I think about getting to a more stable place, I do think about where we're at today. I think about the leadership team that we have in place. I think about the operations that we have in place. I think about the operating principles that we have in place, in how, as we've grown, we've never really lost this vision that we've had. We've never really lost this mentality that we have. And I think that's something from early on being like, was super important to me. And saying like, once we get to a certain scale, like we were going to start to lose these things. And it's like, no, like this is how we get to that scale. This is how we continue to grow, as we abide by these operating principles and we do what we've always done. But when I think about like getting to a certain point where it's comfortable, like I just don't think that's ever going to happen. And maybe that's my position that I'm in as a company. Yes. But I don't think I've ever been in a position in my 6 years where I've personally looked and say like, okay, this is where I could get comfortable. Or okay, I've done this before. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this. And part of it's with the position that I'm in. Part of it is how long I've been here. But I guess on the other side, like I've always felt comfortable with the uncomfortable. You know, where we're going, what we're doing. It was never like this isn't going to happen. It was always a matter of when. It's why I kind of relate to to earlier in this conversation of like what got me interested in NexHealth. Like why Al? He is so hell bent on making this happen, and he has and has been since the beginning. That it's like it was always going to happen. I think it was a matter of when, and it's obviously a matter of how. But yeah, I think that is kind of a circle that I just put out there, but I hope that helps.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's really incredible to see kind of the entire company rally together. Even when we're pivoting and changing small moments, even recently when we kind of announced, or will be hopefully announcing soon, just like what we're doing with our suite of products and simplifying on a go-to-market perspective and how that's happening on the product and engineering side of the room. So I think it's a huge testament to our leadership, specifically with, Al at the helm.
I think like one other thing that I just like learned very early on, and like talking about things that like doing things others won't. Like in a startup and early on, like you literally just have to assume nothing's going to happen unless you're like all over it. You're all over everybody and you're all over everything, or like also like likely nothing's going to happen. And I think that's how we've always operated. I know this isn't necessarily your question, but just another point there.
A lot of ownership. I mean, listen, there's specifically at a startup, there's nowhere to hide. So everybody's got to be doing the job of, typically, 2-3 people.
Yeah. Al used to, a lot of our early customers in the New York area, New York City. Like this is a good story. We had an EMR integration we were looking to build. And there was this doctor out in Queens, super old office, but was using the system. We really wanted access to the system. We really wanted to build this out. It took a lot of time building a relationship with this doctor. And Al was doing the installs here. He was going to go do the install in person. So exactly what you're saying. Our CEO was going out to do an install at this office. The only time we could do it was a Sunday morning. Absolutely threw Al under the bus on this. It's like, yep, we can absolutely be there. We can do it. To my surprise, Al gets up super early on a Sunday morning, and not like Al to do that. Goes out there, meets with this doctor, ends up building the integration, ends up doing the install. Like that was a pretty cool moment. And that was something that would happen over and over again. We'd be on the phone with an office and they'd be like, great, let's do this. Can you come and do this? And we would get on the subway and go to their office and figure it out. And this was before we necessarily knew what we were doing, had built out the product yet. So there's a lot of stories like that. There's a lot of stories of pretty much just doing whatever the hell you had to do to get the job done because there was no other option.
Yeah, I think it's really about living in the details. I mean, being an early employee, whether that's Al or yourself, you'll be responsible for launching the customer, training them on the product. They'll give feedback. And then, the response from a Bobby or Al is, I have some feedback. And, the response is, oh, I'll tell the product manager. It's like, well, I have a bug. Oh, I'll tell the support person. And those are all the same person, right? That's all just Bobby or Al, because there's just no one else, right? So you put on this mask that the company might be a little bit larger, but the truth is that you have 1 or 2 people who are operating the size of a 10-person company.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like you have to be a generalist. Generalists succeed there. Obviously, when companies get to a certain point, like being a specialist, specializing is important. But when it comes to being like a very successful contributor early on, like you have to generalist. Like in the early days, like you're not gonna get, or just in general, like there's a single person that's going to qualify to lead, schedule them for a demo them, sell them, sign them up, lead implementation, provide product support. Like now we don't have 7 people to do that. We had 1. And that's how it was for a very long time.
So you're now working on partnerships in the API. Again, you've been here for 6 years. Obviously the vision is something that excites you, but what's something specific in your day-to-day that's, really getting you excited about NexHealth today?
Yeah. I'm like thrilled to be focusing on this now. And to be honest, something I spent a good amount of time on 2.5, 3 years ago, but we weren't really there yet of going to market with this product, our Synchronizer API. The coolest part to me is, dealing with a lot of these companies, a lot of these other startups, a lot of these developers, even in the early days where they might still be in school, dealing with someone like that, who's a senior in college looking to build a product, to publicly traded companies and actually helping them build a product, helping them go to market, and helping them do it with our technology, like it is the epitome of our vision. And I think that's what's amazing. Like that's what, when I think about day to day, when I think about what I'm doing and I'm working on, like that's it. And that ties into the broader mission here. And that's why I say, like, there's a lot of things that we've worked on the last 6 years, 6+ years, and it all relates back to our mission. And like now a lot of it's really, truly starting to come to fruition, and you all are starting to see a lot more of that now. But that's what's exciting to me. Like it's what I love to do. It's what I love about NexHealth.
So Bobby, we're coming up here at time. Want to make sure, do you have any final thoughts on this episode? Obviously, I'm sure we'll get you back on the show. But want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share any last thoughts for today's episode.
Yeah. I definitely want to come back on, but no, I don't have too much. I don't have anything in particular. I just think about, our operating principles. I think embracing this change on a day-to-day basis versus dreading it is like a really important note that I'd make. It's something that makes NexHealth NexHealth. But no, I don't have anything in particular.
You should be really proud. Being a first employee is freaking impossible. And NexHealth is really turning into something pretty wild.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege. I think that's what I'd actually leave it with. Like being able to join early, being the first employee here, like it's a privilege. Like I know there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of sweat and tears that went into this. And like I said, like you find yourself doing a job that you've never done before constantly. And like, it's a blessing, it's a curse. And like, personally, like I'm incredibly lucky to be able to find NexHealth and be put in this position, have that trust. So yeah, it's a privilege. And I would say, like, being able to learn quickly, like you just got to throw yourself into it, and that's how you do it.
Right on. I'd say it's earned. Everybody, Bobby Jones, Bobby, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.